Chris, in 3 words, explain to me what a peasant cube is.
Uncommons, fast, fun. Again, it's the same thing as the last time I was on here, but it's uncommon this time.
In 3 words, explain to me what makes a peasant cube better than a pauper cube.
The fact you can use uncommons. That is a lot more than 3 words, but that's what it is. That's what it is.
Welcome to UberCube, the podcast we discuss all things peasant, but with refreshments. This is your host, Anthony Adams, a.k.a. UberBear, and today I'm joined by... I'm going to give him some credit. He's a beautiful man. Beautiful man sitting to the left of me. What's your name?
There's me. I don't know where this beautiful man is. Hey, it's
you're
Stu.
Gorgeous.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
I get to sit next to this all the time.
Oh,
and then the one I'd rather sit next to. What's your name? You know your name, man.
Ted.
Ted Talk. And then the one that we kind of keep him in quarantine. He's in his house. We won't let him come over.
Yeah, they won't let me anywhere near themselves. My name is Chris, otherwise known as Sammich.
Yeah, because he just wants to talk about pauper and peasant cube all the time. We want to do
sandwiches.
We want to play real cubes.
Time.
All right. So before we talk about why a peasant cube is a real cube, let's have our drinks. May, you always got the best drinks. What you having?
I'm having mysterious fluid, possibly grape juice with extra steps. It's wine. Of course it's wine.
May's having mulled wine. She stole it from the church. And I am having an oatmeal porter, Highland Brewery. How about yourself, Stu? Samesies. And then Chris?
I got this New Belgian Voodoo Ranger Juicy Haze IPA.
Oh, it's a good one.
I feel like they have way too many voodoo something, though. They have voodoo like iceberg, voodoo coffee,
Absolutely.
voodoo peach, voodoo mint flavor.
If you walked into a room and said, I'm really in the mood for a voodoo IPA, and they said, here, we've got 30 choices,
I would drink them.
You
yes.
wouldn't be complaining.
No, I would not.
But
you know what I'd rather have? This oatmeal porter.
Well, then crack
man
it.
serving them right now.
Well, then crack it.
We're going to make one crack.
Drinking it.
They
There you go.
don't crack very well. They make kind of a...
Well, I already
Does it
cracked
taste
that
like
one. That's
oatmeal?
my fault.
That's the
It
real
does.
It does, as if you were put oatmeal inside of a port and then added an ER to it. This is how it would taste. All right,
I'll
so
have to try it.
let's talk about why peasant cubes, aside from the episode that we did previously talking about pauper cubes, which are absolutely amazing, but we want a next level. Chris, tell us what, for the listeners that don't know what a peasant cube is, kind of give us the roundabout here. What are we looking at?
Yeah, a peasant is a lot like a pauper in that you have put an artificial restriction or a rarity restriction on yourself by using only common and uncommons. It's also known as artisan. That's if you see the word artisan, that also means peasant as well.
It also means cheese, doesn't it? And ham, charcuterie.
Artisanal. That's artisanal.
Artisanal.
A little different. But I believe the official term is artisan, but I call it peasant because that's what most people call it. And it's just common and uncommons. That's the restriction. If it was printed at one of those rarities, it's legal. Not legal, but it is what I will play in this cube.
First question I want to ask. Okay. So obviously the previous episode we did was about the pauper cube. This is peasant. So pauper is common restriction. Peasant is uncommon and common restriction. Where do we see the numbers in this one? So I would like to know, and obviously this is your list that we're going to be discussing today. Where do we see the numbers? So how many commons versus how many uncommons?
Oh, good Lord. I've actually never really looked. It's never really mattered at me.
Are you running a common plus, a pauper plus cube secretly? We don't even know.
Yeah. You know what? Yeah, you caught me. It's never been a peasant cube. It's always been a pauper plus cube. I run uncommon lands. I'm sorry. Uncommon lands.
Blasphemy.
You caught me. That is a question I've never been asked. I actually don't know the answer. I'd have to do some little filtering on here on
I was going to say, can we do? I was going to say, can we do a little bit of that?
I'm sure we can
on the old Cube Cobra.
I'm sure we can. That's assuming that what's in there is the correct printing of what I have in there.
Filter,
because this newer list is not the best for that. Because we also have some that were printed at uncommon and common, so it depends on whatever printing I have in there. All right, currently I have 108 commons. And the rest are uncommon. The rest will be the uncommon.
So of 450.
I was going to say, so this is a 450. So just over 25%. I'm not going to do the math right now, but still 25% of the cube is commons. I'm going to go right off the bat and say that is a surprising number to me, given that Magic power creep, power level, common versus uncommon,
The engineer in me can't say, but I have to say 24%.
It's 24%?
Yeah.
I mean, I was pretty close. Even still, that's a surprising number to me. I expected the number of commons to be lower than 24%.
Yeah, the vast majority of the commons that are in this cube are the spells, because that's just they bait a lot of really good common spells.
Kind of what we talked about before. This has
Yeah.
got to do with the age of the cards, right? You kind of prefaced that in our Popper episode where you talked about creatures weren't so great in the Wayback Machine. We're talking about like circa 93, 94, 95, 96, 97. We can keep going. The creatures weren't great, but spells were broken, right? But rarity symbols kind of came into effect. Was it alpha, beta, unlimited? Then when did they first start?
Rarity symbols didn't come into play until like Exodus, like the Exodus set or something like that. Or
Yes,
maybe after. I can't remember. Yeah.
Yeah, there was always an implied rare. Like, you're not going to have 5 Black Lotuses in an alpha pack, right? They were a rare, so you're only going to get them, but there was no symbol on them to denote which was which. What was a common, what was an uncommon.
It was just their placement in the pack, based on it was their placement in the pack. That's how you knew what your rare and uncommons were in like old sets of Revised or Beta, Alpha, Unlimited kind of thing. Same thing for newer sets up to like Tempest or Urza Saga, all those ones that didn't show rare. Oh, no, Urza Saga showed that. Never mind. But you know what I mean. It's Mirage Visions.
Let me ask you a question. So, aside from the rarity, and rarity has certain attributes that's assigned to it, how does this differentiate itself from a Pauper environment? Where does that line in the sand really occur?
Well, at Uncommon, you start to get things called signposts. You start to get like the signposts uncommons. You've heard that. I'm sure people have heard that term. You start to get archetype defining cards at Uncommon that really help you, when you're drafting, know where to go in that case. And it helps define what you're going to draft. You don't get that at your removal is better. Your creatures are better. They're much better, much more efficient than they are at common. You get much better 1-drops. Holy crap, you get much better 1-drops. That's just some of the fixing is kind of the same, but you also get access to the tri-lands that you wouldn't have at common.
I'd like to highlight, if I will. I love that you mentioned the 1-drops, but I'm going to extend this to the 2-drops as well. As far as the power level is concerned, so I'm just going to pick up, I've got the list in front of me, so I'm just going to randomly scan through a couple of the 1 and 2 drops.
I wonder.
So, well, obviously, white is the furthest left on Cube Cobra. Okay, so the first one that's going to stick out is Mother of Runes. Okay, no doubt.
That one.
But also,
brand new edition, by the way. Never been in the
never
cube
been
before.
seen before.
Yeah,
Never been discussed.
But
right.
also,
just added it.
But also, let's look at others, right? So you've also got Thraben Inspector. You've also got Usher of the Fallen in the 1s. In the 2s, you've got Adanto Vanguard. You've got Cathar Commando. Very, very powerful cards. Wall of Omens, even.
Yep.
Blue, less so in the 1 and 2. Black generally tends, in my opinion, to be a little bit more on the enabler side, although you do have Deep Cavern Bat and Marionette Apprentice. Certainly Deep Cavern Bat massively sticks out to me as kind of a power outlier in those 1 and 2s. Red, Dragon's Rage Channeler. Like, that don't need a whole lot of introduction. Green has Arbor Elf. It has Elvish Mystic.
You are touching the sky with vintage a little bit. Would you agree?
I mean,
You
that's kind of the point, isn't it, right?
Yeah.
So immediately when you think of things like Pauper and Peasant, I'm thinking power level and super low, and it's just not going to be even close to the experience that I want to get if I'm a high power level.
Heartfire Hero that just went, was it the Pro Tour?
So
These cards are insane.
And that's, so Heartfire Hero, 1 red, Mouse Soldier. Is that the first time we've seen a Mouse Soldier? I don't remember seeing a Mouse Soldier before. Anyway.
The Secret of Nim.
Sure. In Matt, I'll give you that. Okay. So, but this has Valiant, So this has Valiant. Whenever it becomes the target of a spell or ability you control for the first time each turn, you get to put a +1/+1 counter on it. When it dies, it deals damage to its power to each opponent. That is a lot going on for a 1-mana uncommon creature. This kind of sums up, for me, power creep
pants really well.
Yeah, and just
equipment works so good with that. with that.
Yeah, this has got to be a bit of a telltale for people that might have any kind of questions on
Rancor. I mean, hello. So we're kind of touching the sun a little bit, right? It's kind of like just below that cusp of an Eternal Cube. Would you agree with that statement, Chris?
Yeah, it kind of is. It's again an artificial restriction I've placed on it, and a lot of other people, who run Peasant cubes do the same, obviously. But to me, I like it because it again, just like the Pauper, it kind of reminds me of more old school Magic. But for me, like when I was playing long time ago, before I was playing a lot of crazy combos and stuff like that. There's just none of that really here that are like 2-card, easy to win, instant win combos. I just prefer that kind of Magic. I like turning stuff sideways. I like winning in that way. That's the kind of way I like to play.
So you stole my question that I'll present post that answer, right? It was, what is the appeal of building this type of cube? So you're singleton, you are common and uncommon. Why? I mean, people want to know why. Why would you be bothered to do any of these things? Like, what is the reason that you would push to almost touch the sun, not quite be a vintage cube, not power max? Why bother? That's my question.
Let's rein it in just a little bit. This is not quite a vintage cube. You've got a spattering of creatures that you can argue are maybe power outliers because they exist in both the vintage cube and they belong very solidly in the vintage cube and are also inclusions in this cube. And I'm not going to go into the philosophy of the cube. Obviously, I'm not qualified for that. Sammich is here for a very, very good reason as the god of Pauper and
all cube.
of all cube. Let's just say of all cubes. Got to be interesting to anyone that would even look at this list for the first time. Mate, help me out with this. Am I crazy for thinking that there's some kind of power outlier problem almost when I'm looking at a list that has this kind of spattering of these power outliers in a cube that's designed to be, dare I say it, at the lower power level?
So, I'm glad that you brought me into this because I've been holding up my tabs for very specific cards in mind where when we're talking about like Peasant as a restriction, we are bound by uncommons in that uncommons are right at the cusp when we start getting let's call them outlier cards, right? Let's take Mayhem Devil for an example. Mayhem Devil is a card that can fundamentally break a cube in half if the environment is relying on things like fetches, or the best way I can explain it is that the more powerful things that you're doing, the more that Mayhem Devil scales with that environment, right? And then you have cards that I specifically notated as Great Sword of Tyr, where this is a common, just for future reference. But the reason why I'm highlighting this is because it represents a kind of, let's say, convergence of commander design and, I don't want to say normal Magic design, but let's say limited design, right? And Great Sword of Tyr is a very powerful card, right? And there are a lot of uncommons where that's just kind of the commonplace for them, right? And the more and more that we get into 2025's era of Magic and what we've already experienced with 2020's eras of Magic is that more and more Wizards of the Coast is going to be pushing commander-centric cards. And part of that is making sure that these uncommons can scale. And because that scalability, it can lead to a lot of powerful cards sitting in that uncommon slot that tends to find its way into Peasant environments. And then it can almost warp the environment if you're not actually like preparing around it. However, there's enough density nowadays that I really feel like that it can balance itself out. And that line is fun to kind of tread.
I think it's fun that you actually said pauper, peasant, peasant, pauper, and the entanglement of these ideas, because there is a convergence that's happening. So, Chris, back to the original question that Stu presented, we're looking at air quotes 24%, give or takes, right? Of this cube is common. How are you managing, I guess, the power spikes for people who want to press beyond? They want to, you said this was kind of self-imposed requirement here, right? You did this to yourself. First question is, what's the appeal of doing that? That's come up often. I felt myself in Discords defending the idea of the restriction, right? It's come up like, why not have the best lands? Why not have the best broken spells like Snuff Out, which you do run in these free spells, right? The dark times of Magic where everything didn't have a rarity symbol. How do you balance this stuff? Where do you draw this line?
You have to, in my opinion, when I'm looking at those kind of like, there are cards that I don't specifically include because they are absolute egregious power outliers. One being like Palace Jailer and stuff like that. I that's just an uncommon for some reason. But balancing it is hard. You have to kind of make sure, like a lot of it takes a lot of play testing and everything, to make sure that these cards don't cause people to have the feel bads. Because I want people to have fun when they play this cube. And a lot of times you have to kind of give people, instead of like, I think May kind of said it best in earlier episodes. It's like, yes, you're going to give one archetype more power by leaving a card like that in, but if you can boost the other archetypes to get a little better, then maybe you don't need to worry about that power outlier so much. And that's what I'm trying to do with this kind of cube. Is I'm trying to make sure that everything is kind of on an even playing field. There are going to be there's going to be the best card. There always will be. I can remove it, and then the next card will be then the next one down will become the best card. And it's like I only really remove a lot of these cards that are egregious if people really hate playing them, and that's the kind of thing I go with. I go with player feedback a lot.
So I've known you forever. The first time that we ever met in a gym together and you saw me running on that treadmill and you're like, I got to talk to this guy, right? So how do you set yourself apart from the rest of the community? I've seen you do things. Do you follow Discords and MTG Salvation? Are you looking at kind of like we talked about before with air quotes, the Pauper Cube? Or are you trying to do breakouts? Like a cited example that I'll use, you talked about this is draw more than one spell. You're trying to find uniqueness. I don't mean to lead the witness a little bit, but what have you done to make yours a little different that people should look at a little bit more?
Well, I do like the idea of the cast a second spell or draw a second card. And I have a lot of cards in here that kind of play off of that. And that's the kind of thing that I really like. I've added a few cards that really play off of that. Like a couple of examples would be Emrakul's Messenger and Mischievous Mystic are a couple of big players within that archetype. And I really like the idea that, and I've kind of added cards that in all colors that will allow you to draw more cards, so you can play those cards with any color basically, and to draw a second card or do anything like that. One of the things, and you mentioned using things like something like MTG Salvation. And I will say this, recently, every year for the past few years, I've been part of something on MTG Salvation. And it's a wonderful resource. I know the site's ancient, it's been around forever, but there's a group of peasant cubers on there that put out a average peasant cube list every year. And they take an aggregate of all the cubes that want to be part of it, and they look at all the cards that are in each of those cubes, and they kind of give you a number, like Young Pyromancer is in 108 out of 135 cubes or something like that. And and they have different tiers, like these are this card's in 20 to 25 cubes, this card's in 30 to 35, this card's in, and all the way up until you hit the top. And what it does is, I don't build the cube off of that, but it gets me to think. It's like, is this card worth it, or am I ahead of the curve? You know what I mean? It's like, have I found something that maybe people aren't into yet? And it's like, so I kind of, it gives me a lot to think about when I'm adding cards or taking cards away.
That's funny you should mention, are they into it yet? Because your cube is quite known at this point. You've been featured at CubeCon multiple times, and you are listed as one of the more popular cubes. You and I are like neck and neck with UberBear's Artifact Cube. It's fun to look at.
No.
You have to look at the stats because he and I are always like 3 apart.
Chris is way more popular than you are.
Way cooler.
Don't try and take his
way
thunder.
Cooler, but it's got this little, there's little races kind of happening. Because I do look at you, and we've talked about this before, as kind of, it's easy to follow other people's ideas, but I look at you and how you've kind of impacted my cubes and made them better. I mean, we've talked about this before. You have to take a little bit of this, like a little pat on the back, but you've done so much to help me that I think people reflecting upon your cube specifically, not the status quo, if you will, right? But you are a little bit of a pioneer in this field. You do listen to a lot of people, but you think outside the box. You try things that are weird. You're definitely a tester, right? Like a lot like May. I respect you both because I ask both of you for those corner cases. You see the angles that other people don't see. And I'll stop patting you on the back now because I don't like you as much as I like May.
That's okay.
May's way better.
I totally get it.
You're a guest.
Really
She's way better. There's a reason.
Huh?
I'm totally fine with it. That's all.
Love you, Chris.
May, you got to deal with them a lot more often. So
Yeah.
it's fine.
Yeah,
It's
we
true.
have
You're
to-
the real winner here.
Yeah. You get to leave today. You don't have to come back
Yeah, you
and
didn't
deal
visit
with
6
nonsense.
weeks. You gotta fix my cubes every quarter.
Let me. So I want to go back. Let's go all the way back to the beginning, and some of this has been kind of promotional, if I will, in a method, right? So
UberCubeathon, yes.
UberCubeathon. We've obviously promoted
Featured,
this cube, but we're also thinking about that from the grand perspective of, if we want people to be able to get into Cube, we actually talked about this previously in our Pauper Cube, where you can literally build a Pauper Cube for less than $100. You could bling it out for $100 with foils and all the good stuff.
That's not accurate. No.
Except for the sleeves.
Add a
And now
zero-
you're talking.
No, add a zero. Mm-mm. Pauper cubes are expensive. I'm just going to stand corrected a little bit. I like his price point. It's nuts. I'm telling you, go flat. Don't worry about the foils. Have fun.
Well, that's what I'm saying. You can build one for cheap,
Oh,
or
yeah,
you can
yeah,
foil one out like crazy.
The foiling's
right?
nuts, yeah.
So this is similarly in that vein, right? You've got commons and uncommons. The price point is extremely affordable for anyone that's looking to get their group into playing Cube. But there's also a familiarity a sort of aspect to this, right? Especially with the prevalence of Cube drafting, especially vintage Cube on YouTube, on Twitch, whatever, right? You can go right now, if you were born today and just figured, I want to watch vintage Cube content and do nothing else for the rest of my life, it would probably take a good number of years before you run out of stuff to watch, okay? And some of the Cube cards, some of the cards that are in this cube are going to be so incredibly familiar to people, right? Again, I mentioned Mother of Runes. I mentioned things like Deep Cavern Bat. A lot of those cards are very familiar. What was so fascinating to me, we drafted this cube yesterday. I got my ass handed to me very, very comfortably. And I drafted like a black, red, white kind of sacrifice-y, kind of, you know, I felt like I had some synergies in there. Got absolutely ruined. One of the cards that just did me in, I played against our good friend Christian of the channel. He played Shoreline Looter. This is one colorless and a blue. It's a creature rat rogue. It's a 1/1, cannot be blocked, has threshold. Whenever Shoreline Looter deals combat damage to a player, draw a card. Then discard a card unless 7 or more cards are in your graveyard. This card, that I'll be honest, it's been a while since I've even played Magic, let alone drafted this Peasant cube. Christian landed this card. It won him the game. This card by itself, without any question. It didn't matter how much pressure I was trying to put on him as a player. He just drowned me in card advantage. And I felt like I drafted a pretty well synergized deck. All of the things that I felt that I was putting together did something and worked together. One card that is going to be probably pretty unfamiliar with anyone outside of either, you know, dedicated limited draft players, whatever the case may be, may not be particularly familiar with this card. So this is something that I felt was very interesting, because you've now got a cube that is very synergistic, has a lot of fun and, you know, diverse archetypes, but the cards themselves are just going to be unknown to a lot of people. How do you kind of balance that? I would say almost from a selling point, right? You're showing up to an event, you're showing up to an LGS. How do you balance this as a selling point to, hey, I've got Mother of Runes or Deep Cavern Bat, which everybody knows, to, hey, I've got Shoreline Looter. What the hell is that?
Well, Stu, I'm going to interject here. Sorry. But, you know what's funny about modern era of Magic? The funniest part is that a lot of the cards that we've gotten so comfortable with have gotten downshifted. And the battle that I've been fighting for about roughly a year has finally been won because Shivan Dragon got downshifted to uncommon.
Now listen.
I won.
Now listen.
I was right.
It did. And we all love us some Shivan Dragon.
So the answer is, if we want to get more people in, we just downshift more cards like Shivan Dragon. I'm just saying.
Right. I will say this, master sets are my favorite sets to come out because they're the ones that have the downshifts. It's my favorite time of year. Anytime a master set comes out.
Look, Pauper as a format is going to scream and cry, and it's an unfortunate sacrifice that I'm willing to make.
I feel like Pauper maybe gets a little bit of the advantage with that. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like there's probably a lower bar for Wizards of the Coast to downshift a card from uncommon to common than there would be. Like, Shivan Dragon is a very, very old card. It's been power crept out the wazoo. But even with newer cards, and you could, I don't know, I don't want to put like an arbitrary number of years since its original printing, but I maybe would feel like there's a lower bar, an easier bar, if you will, for a card to be downshifted from uncommon to common. So maybe Pauper is probably likely to get a little bit of, extra pieces of candy here or there. Uncommon, maybe not so much.
Well, wait, I will tell you this. Commander Masters was a boon for Peasant cubes. We got things like Gaunty and Anafenza and what's the green guy that puts counters on things?
If it's a commander card, it probably got downshifted to increase.
Oh yeah, exactly. It was insane. We got so many good cards out of that. Surak the Dragonclaw, we got him too, or the Hunt Caller, Surak the Hunt Caller, and Goreclaw the Terror of Call something. I don't know.
I wonder if Wizards had this in mind, right? That, because let's face it, it's a commander deck. It's a precon. There isn't really a necessity for them to place a rarity on any of these cards, right? They're just coming in a 100-card precon.
This is Commander Masters. This was Commander Masters, which was a draft set.
Sure, but even Commander decks, right? Even just the Commander precons have come out. They've got rarity symbols on those cards, right? So I wonder,
for some reason, yeah.
It seems a little bit arbitrary. Like, hey, these are 100 cards. There's no duplicates other than basic lands. It's designed to be picked up and played out of the box, right? But we've got these rarity symbols that are associated with them. So obviously Wizards is very cognizant of power level being a big factor when it comes to the rarity. And but that takes me all the way back, right? Now we've still got Mother of Runes in the same rarity as Mardu Woe Reaper and Fear of, or Spyglass Siren. Yeah.
there's a lot of Peasant cubes that don't run Mother of Runes, for power level reasons, and I understand
for good reasons, obviously.
Yeah, for good reason. I'm not saying it's not a good reason.
We've never talked about that 14 times, but I kind of want to
never die.
Well, so my question for you though is so as these goodies get churned up, right? So rarity restriction has its own kind of appeal and its problematic situation. I don't do any form of rarity restriction that I currently own, right? Gave away the Pauper, so I don't have to worry about this. But you get to see these downshifts that come out with the Commander Masters and whatnot. So how do you, I guess, stop yourself? How do you stop? Like Gaunty's a prime example. This card is busted. And it's actually busted at rare. I still run it in my Power Cube, even though maybe I shouldn't. The effect is so strong.
You probably shouldn't.
But I still do. And it
you
still does it.
Probably shouldn't.
Still does its thing. But how do you stop it from, like, where do you put the limits on this? Because just because it went from rare to uncommon, Chris, where do you draw the line? Where's the line?
For the most part, it's based on player feedback. If people really had a problem playing against it, and people were saying, "I hate this card so
Like
much,"
Mother of Runes, for example, that'd be a good example.
Stu, you don't count for Mother of Runes.
I cannot be the only person.
He's not. You're not.
Be the
He so
only
listens to the
person
player
that
feedback.
said,
We
"Hang
got
on a
that."
minute, this Mother of Runes is a little
Very open to player
bit
feedback.
strong."
We heard it here, folks.
Hang on. Let's be honest.
Audience,
it's player feedback.
I think that
unless
this is
it's
very important.
mine.
If you do not think that Mother of Runes belongs in a peasant cube such as this, make sure to send all of your emails to us so that we can compile the entire list and then forward them to Sammich.
www.sammich.com.
You're welcome.
There's a magical thing in email. There's a magical thing in email. It's called a delete button, and I can do that. I know how to do that. It's amazing. I know how to do that.
It's an interesting dynamic, though. So let's talk about kind of Peasant. So one of the things I mentioned at the end of the Pauper episode is that hand stripping less matters, right? Let's just say the hypothetical duress. Let's go really weird. Let's say Mind Twist, which I know it's not real, or Hymn to Torok. Let's go wild, right? These cards are super powerful they're a known quantity for breaking up combos. But now we step from the Pauper, which is very creature-centric. Now you've moved over to the Peasant. Do you have combos in here that we should break up?
A couple things that are like 3 and 4 card combos. Like there is a persist combo in here, where got things like Good Fortune Unicorn and Grum Gully in here to help you get put some counters on things. And we do have Murderous Redcap and also Kitchen Finks as well. Just a couple of persist creatures. It takes like 3 and 4 cards to do it, so I view it's kind of okay. That's
does that disruption matter now? We've changed. So I talked about it before. The zones have kind of changed now, right? The air quotes, I'm going to say this, probably going to get some scoring for it. The intelligence of the cards have now adjusted. They've gotten a little less
complexity.
Complexity has ratcheted. Whether we like it or not, we're talking about the Gaunties of the world now.
It has. And I'm still running, and I do run things like Inquisition of Kozilek and the new Intimidation Tactics. I did put that in, the new one with the cycling, which I really like. But unfortunately, I would love to run. I'm waiting for the day when Thoughtseize becomes an uncommon. That would be a great day.
My gosh. Blasphemy.
Well, I want to kind of spin back. So we've stripped hands now. We're doing the awful thing that nobody likes. In this cube, do you venture into the idea of like the strip mines?
No. Actually, those are considered banned in my opinion, because I will not run even though they were printed at common and uncommon, basically. There's the weird rarity rulings way back when, where they were printed on the uncommon or common sheet, where you could run things like Library of Alexandria and something like this. And no, I don't run things like Demonic Tutor, Soul Ring, Skull Clamp, Ancient Tomb, Strip Mine, Wasteland, Force of Will. I don't run those, even though those are all uncommon.
There's a commonality between all of those cards, right? What cube do all of those cards show up in?
Emma Partlove's cube? I said it. I was going to say her Peasant cube pushes these limits. So
exactly.
When you're looking at
that's great.
These boundaries, right? Because these are options that you do have as a curator. Back to that.
Absolutely.
I think that's the point, right? This is incredible. What a breadth of options that you have on a self-imposed restriction at this rarity level, right? There's 3/4 rarity levels, right? If you want to go common, uncommon, rare, and mythic rare. And even just with this 50% off.
Oh, and then we also have
the breadth is incredible.
We also had the special printing or the Universes Beyond that we all should. That's other rares.
Anthony will be here all week. He will try the veal.
They're here. They're here.
Thank you, Anthony. But those are also right. So yes, you can find a place for those, regardless of your restriction within uncommon. But also those cards are like they're all staple vintage cube cards as well. Like Thoughtseize, absolutely, without a shadow of a doubt.
Hymn to Torok.
Hymn to Torok is a miserable card to play.
Miserable card.
common, by the way.
Yeah, and that is a
It's
common,
such
exactly.
a gross card.
Yes, I have chosen not to run that in my pauper or peasant. It's kind of miserable to play against.
I would argue
was
that
the
you've
big reason
centered
to call it
in
out.
on the fun factor, right? So that's kind of a boundary we've all created in our cubes. May's done it. Stu's currently working on it. We've all done it. So we've played these cards and we've tried them out, and they do meet these air quotes requirements of rarity, right? But you have to choose as a curator, is this the type of playstyle that you want to support? May, you know all about this. Like, so the Fey Cube, for example, and I'll keep throwing this to you, you have to make very specific choices. You just did the persist combo recently. It took you forever to get there. How'd you feel about pushing that?
Yeah, so how I ended up coming to that decision was that I was paying attention to what the metagame was, but I'm also just in a privileged position as a cube curator because I'm able to get a lot more data than most people. I'm able to get a lot more people testing that are able to get more drafts than I myself can get. And because I have that information, I'm able to make the decisions and figure out like what the meta is going on with it and, act accordingly. And you can kind of do that with Peasant and Pauper formats because you can kind of see a lot of the overlap that exists between Pauper and Peasant environments, especially when you see like the power-pushed Pauper Peasant environments. Then you can really find that kind of meta that you can kind of shift your perspective around. And when you are looking at, say, calling back to the Gonti as example, you can see how a card like Gonti can upend what is currently standing in the meta, right? And you can actually make your decisions around that. And that is something that you can observe by actually going through Cube Cobra's data, because they actually have it under the analysis data. If you click cards and you go under top cards, whatnot, or packages, then it'll actually tell you like the percentage that certain packages show up and whatnot. You can use that to kind of inform like what's performing well, what people are actually drafting and whatnot. The data's there if you're willing to go and grab it.
So I have a follow-up question for Sammich, Chris and May also at the same time. Both of your cubes have become quite elevated. People know they're your cubes. The Peasant Cube in particular, and obviously May's Fey Cube, it's been bought by Milton Bradley at this point. So my question that I have for both of you is, because both your cubes are highly visible, have been featured at multiple CubeCons, what is the pressure that you both feel, and I'll start with Chris, as far as like substantiating your claims, if you will, right? Your choices. Do you feel any need to, I guess, project your ideas to the community?
All right. Well, I'm going to say this first and foremost. I built this cube for us, basically. I'm going to say that right now. I built this cube for us, and I built it to play with people I know. But having a CubeCon was great. It was great because I got a lot of different information. I talked to a lot of people who played it. And what I've discovered is I can't worry too much about what people who are playing it, at one of those events are going to say, because they're getting one draft of the cube. And I want it to be fun for them. So I'm trying to pick, cards that I think won't be unfun, which is why I leave things out like Monarch, Initiative, and Dungeons and Buyback and stuff like that. And I try, and like things like Hymn to Turak, and and if you have a Peasant Cube that runs all those things, that's fine. But it's just what I've chosen not to do. I've chosen to not do that because our play group doesn't find that kind of play patterns fun in a Peasant environment. So that's kind of how I decide what I want to do and what I don't want to do with that.
I want to extend that to May, right? Because you're in a similar position where your cubes are very curated for yourself and the environment that you get to play in, right? Your group, this is something that you've spoke about and you're passionate about your cube and how you're curating it for the people that are going to play in it. Is that sort of a similar direction that you choose for the choices that you make with the cards, or do you tend to internalize? And the reason why I ask that is because I have found myself internalizing and being, this is almost sucks to say, but I almost feel myself being a little selfish with the decisions that I make. And maybe that's because I'm newer to the curation of. I don't know. Am I crazy for that?
Are selfish, reel it back. So the biggest advice that I can give, for context to answer your question, no, I do not design the fake cube for the sake of my group. Yes, on occasion I'm able to enjoy it for like my local play group and whatnot. However, for a majority of the time, the fake cube, a lot of the decisions that I make are based around how it's received through my almost 300 followers now. It's received through the people who clone this cube. It's received for the people who go to CubeCon and expect like this kind of experience, right? And for that, I can have that sort of perspective of I am designing this cube with an express purpose to sort of aid the community that finds themselves in this cube, right? However, there is a term in graphic design that I feel like is important. And that term is know your target market. It doesn't matter what the message that you're trying to say, so long as that the message that you are saying reaches your target audience, okay? And your cube design should be in the same way. What Sammich is doing is more correct than what I'm doing. I will just outright say that. I am the exception. I am not the rule, all right? I am so confused about why people like the fake cube so much. But when it comes to cases like Sammich's Peasant Cube, Popper Cube, etc., these are cubes that are going to be drafted significantly more often in person. These are cubes that are going to be enjoyed with people that are local to Sammich, right? And that's the feedback that ultimately matters. Like, yes, when you take it to CubeCon or whatever, that you can get a lot of feedback, you can get a lot of useful advice and lots of data and whatnot. All those are extremely useful things. But at the end of the day, it's the play group that you're playing around and how they feel about the cards. That is the opinions that matter.
So, May, describe the fake cube in 3 words.
Other than just fun.
I don't think I was going to do fun.
That's my way.
Yeah.
But I guess since I'm being put on the spot for the 3 words, since Sammich already had to do it twice, I'll bite the bullet, I guess. If I were to explain the fake cube in 3 words, it would be typal, synergistic. Shoot, that's 4 words. Because I was going to say low power.
Let May have 4.
I went over 4 words.
Mid-range.
Low power has a dash. Low power has a dash. There you go.
Low power has a dash. There you go.
So
mid-range. Mid-range fairy tales.
That's 3 words already, May.
I don't know.
So, Chris,
Look, I'm doing my best.
I said 12 words on mine.
This is fun. I'm doing this for my pure masochistic reasons. So, Chris, as we close out, why should people play Peasant Cube?
Peasant Cube is, to me, a very fun and engaging environment. It is one that kind of is mimicking more so retail limited, which is, so if you enjoy that, I think you'd enjoy this. It's a powerful environment without being broken, in my opinion. And you can also, like I said, I've really worked on it, but aggro is real good in this cube. So I'm just going to point that out right now.
Whoa. Hang on. Don't give people a reason not to want to play. We want to give them a reason to want to play.
Draft Mother Runes is what we should tell them.
Yes, there we go.
Yeah, just Mother Runes,
Mother
not
Runes
deck.
and like 8 other 1-drops. But anyway, it's a very synergistic environment. It does a lot. I really do enjoy this cube. It's been my like the one I've worked on probably the most out of all my cubes that I have. And the one I put the most energy into.
For the listeners, full disclosure, this was my least favorite cube of our group. And this is the Wayback Machine. I had total disdain for this cube. And then I fell in love with this cube. And I want to play it all the time. It's so weird how that happens. Like, the evolution of this cube has been, it's even hard to put in words. It's amazing. And the fact that you haven't even followed the trail of others, you've broken the mold. That's what I'll call it. So if you want to find a cube that's a little different than everything else you see online, look at Sammich's Peasant Cube. It's amazing.
So I'm going to tie this off with a reference to our previous episode about the Pauper Cube. So you can go right now, and we should, as we will, include a link to the cube on Cube Cobra. So cheapest printing for the Pauper Cube was like $70. That's pretty cheap. So this cube is $221 as far as Cube Cobra is concerned. The difference in experience as far as everything from archetypes, play patterns, everything is going to be so different. And there's not a non-zero amount of crossover between the two cubes. Again, as Chris mentioned, you've got 100 or so, right?
24%.
20.
As
Anthony,
we do. As we do.
24. Like,
I can't not.
But that really does tell you that there is sort of a closeness between the two, and yet the way that the two cubes play is so unbelievably different, and the experience that you can have. So we're literally talking about, you can get two cubes that are going to play so very different for $300 in Magic cards. And let's face it, if you've played for a few years, you've probably got a whole bunch of these cards, especially with how new
and
a lot of the cards
16
are.
players, theoretically.
Exactly. Like, are you looking to host your own UberCubeathon that's happening in, Chapel Hill, North Carolina in April? I mean, I'm just saying.
April 26th.
What a fantastic opportunity that you've got. Get all your friends, get your mother's friends, get everybody together.
Free ticket to CubeCon.
But yeah, and
For the winner.
first of all, and a huge thanks to Chris for coming out and hanging out with us today. It's always a joy, and I don't mean to... I don't want to. This isn't a negative against you in any way, shape, or form.
Because Anthony.
But, of course.
Yeah,
but I feel like what you really should put a bit more effort into is my countless sort of nudges where I'm like, hey, here's my cube. I could do with a bit of help with it. And I really don't feel like I'm getting the attention that I need to fix my disaster class. So this is a little public, but I could do with some help. And this is going to go out to May and to you, Anthony.
Well, it's easy.
Well, Anthony, you've been here, so I've kind of forced it upon you.
Your new cube that you're working on, we have to talk about. Add Mother Runes. It should fix it.
It's not... all right,
we'll fix everything.
All right, thank you.
She's mom. She's your mom. She's got teeth. She's ready to go. She's got teeth.
That's your downfall, Chris. Get your cube, curation doctor classes going along. The community will
I'll
help.
do that. Sure.
And on that note, we're moving to the socials.
First of all, big shout out and a big thank you to all of our Patreons, to Patrick, Jeff Stumpo, Nick Lapointe, Chris Fitzgerald, Timber Dragon, Brian Christensen, Keaton Schultz, Lord Justice, Preston, and Sam McKenna. As always, your ongoing support is hugely appreciated by all of us at the UberCube crew. We cannot tell you how much we appreciate it. The new mics are doing a great job. At least we think so. Again, we want to make sure that we've got everybody's attention for UberCubeathon 2025. This is on April 26th in Chapel Hill, North Carolina at the Gathering Place. A link to the event is going to be in the show notes. We would love to see you guys there. It's going to be a great event.
TCG affiliate link will be included in the show notes.
That's right.
So we're just using some long thing. Don't read it. Click on my little image. Whenever you go to Buzzsprout or you go to your Spotify or whatnot, click on the link. It opens it up. Order your cards.
As always, facebook.com/groups/mtgcube if you want to get in on the discussion there, as well as our wonderful Discord. So much cool stuff going on right there. A lot of discussion, a lot of sets coming out right now.
1,000 people in our Facebook.
1,000 people on the Facebook.
That means at least 2 of them like me. That's really good.
That's adventurous, but I'll let you have that.
Chris and Stu.
Yeah. Well, Chris is shaking his head as well. So I don't know about that. If you want to support the show, you can also use our inkedgaming.com/UberCube affiliate link for all kinds of really cool products, playmats, dice bags, mouse pads, custom and large volume products available. You can reach us at Twitter. We are at UberCubeMTGPod. You can also reach us via email if you got a longer question or comment about one of the episodes or about the podcast in general. We are at UberCubeMTGPodcast@gmail.com. And you can also find us at Bluesky, UberCubeMTGPodcast.bsky.social, as well as YouTube at UberCube MTG Podcast 747. And again, a big thanks to all of our patrons at patreon.com/UberCube for all the ongoing support. Much love.
And then other than that, happy peasants!